10 men. Just 10 men. That is all he had. 10 SS soldiers in rubber boats crossing a river into a hostile city of 500,000 people. No artillery support, no air cover, no backup. No plan beyond sheer audacity and the kind of reckless confidence that either gets you killed immediately or makes you a legend forever. On April 13, 1941, a 29-year-old SS captain named Fritz Klingenberg crossed the Danube River with 10 men and captured the capital city of Yugoslavia. He walked into Belgrade with a handful of soldiers and walked out with an entire city. And the story of how he did it is one of the most extraordinary and bizarre episodes of the entire Second World War. Fritz Klingenberg was born on December 17, 1912, in Verden an der Aller, a small town in Lower Saxony in northern Germany. He grew up in a Germany that was still processing the trauma of the First World War, the humiliation of the Versailles Treaty, and the economic chaos of the Weimar Republic. He was a young man of his generation in the most complete sense, shaped by defeat, hungry for something to believe in. And like hundreds of thousands of young Germans in the early 1930s, he found that something in the Nazi movement, and specifically in the SS. He joined the SS Verfügungstruppe in the mid-1930s. This was the armed military formation of the SS that would eventually become the Waffen-SS. He was an exceptional soldier from the very beginning. Physically impressive, tactically gifted, and possessed of a quality that his superiors noticed immediately. He was completely fearless, not the reckless fearlessness of a man who does not understand danger, but the calculated fearlessness of a man who understands danger perfectly and chooses to ignore it because the objective matters more than his own survival. That quality would define his entire military career. It would also eventually kill him. He served in the early campaigns of the war, Poland in 1939, France in 1940. He distinguished himself in both campaigns and rose through the SS officer ranks with the speed that exceptional combat performance produced in the Waffen-SS. By the spring of 1941, he was a Hauptsturmführer, a captain, commanding a motorcycle reconnaissance company in the Das Reich SS division. And in April 1941, Germany turned its attention to the Balkans. Yugoslavia had been a target of German pressure for months. Hitler wanted Yugoslavia as part of his strategic network before launching Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union. He needed secure southern flanks. He needed Yugoslav cooperation or Yugoslav submission. The Yugoslav government had actually signed the Tripartite Pact, aligning itself with Germany in late March 1941. But 2 days later, a military coup overthrew the government, and the new leadership made clear it would not honor the agreement. Hitler was furious. He ordered the immediate invasion and destruction of Yugoslavia. The campaign began on April 6, 1941. German forces drove into Yugoslavia from multiple directions simultaneously. The Yugoslav army, poorly equipped and badly organized, began collapsing almost immediately. The speed of the German advance was extraordinary, even by the standards of the campaigns that had preceded it, and leading elements of the Das Reich division, including Klingenberg's motorcycle reconnaissance company, were pushing deep into Yugoslav territory faster than almost anyone else. By April 11th, Klingenberg's unit had reached the town of Alibunar, about 50 kilometers east of Belgrade. The capital was tantalizingly close. But his orders did not include taking Belgrade. His mission was reconnaissance. His job was to probe forward, gather information, and report back. He was not supposed to be anywhere near the Yugoslav capital with a handful of motorcycles and a reconnaissance company. What happened next is the moment that made Fritz Klingenberg famous. He looked at his maps. He looked at the distance to Belgrade. He looked at his men. And he made a decision that was either brilliant or insane, depending on how you look at it. He decided to keep going. On April 12th, his unit reached the Danube River across from Belgrade. The bridges had been destroyed by the retreating Yugoslav forces. There was no way across for vehicles. A rational officer, following his orders, would have stopped there, reported the situation, and waited for further instructions. Klingenberg was not interested in being rational. He found several rubber inflatable boats. He selected 10 men from his company, and on the morning of April 13, 1941, he crossed the Danube River into Belgrade with 10 soldiers in rubber boats. They landed on the Belgrade waterfront without opposition. The city was in chaos. Yugoslav military and government authority had essentially collapsed. The population was terrified and confused. German aircraft had been bombing the city since April 6th in a raid that had killed thousands of civilians. The streets were a mixture of destruction, panic, and an eerie emptiness as residents sheltered from what they expected to be a massive ground assault. Klingenberg and his 10 men moved into the city. They found vehicles, commandeered them, and drove toward the center of Belgrade. They raised a German flag over a building they occupied. And then Klingenberg made the move that transformed a reckless adventure into a legendary story. He found the German embassy. The German ambassador, Hans-Georg von Mackensen, was still in the city. Klingenberg went to him, and together they hatched a plan. Klingenberg sent a message to the commander of the Belgrade garrison, a Yugoslav general named Dragutin Savatic, demanding the city's surrender. The message was delivered with the confident authority of a man commanding a massive force poised to destroy the city if his demands were not met. In reality, Klingenberg had 10 men, a handful of vehicles, and an enormous bluff. But the Yugoslav commander did not know that. He knew German forces were closing in from multiple directions. He knew his position was hopeless. He knew the city had already been bombed into partial ruin, and he believed that the German officer standing in front of him represented the advance guard of an overwhelming force. General Savatic surrendered Belgrade. The capital of Yugoslavia, a city of 500,000 people, fell to 10 SS soldiers and a motorcycle reconnaissance captain who had decided to ignore his orders and keep driving. Klingenberg raised the German swastika flag over the city. He sent a radio message back to his division reporting that Belgrade had been taken. The reaction from his superiors ranged from disbelief to fury to amazement. He had gone far beyond his orders. He had taken extraordinary risks with his men. He had acted completely independently in a way that could have ended in disaster. But it had not ended in disaster. It had ended in the capture of an enemy capital. And in the Nazi military system, success covered a multitude of sins. Word of what Klingenberg had done reached Hitler almost immediately. Hitler was delighted. This was exactly the kind of bold, aggressive, individual initiative that Nazi military mythology celebrated. The young SS officer who had taken a capital city with 10 men was exactly the propaganda story that Goebbels needed. Klingenberg was summoned to meet Hitler personally. He was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, one of the highest military decorations in Nazi Germany. Goebbels' propaganda machine went to work immediately. The story of the capture of Belgrade was broadcast across Germany and occupied Europe. Klingenberg became a celebrated figure, a living example of SS courage and initiative, proof of the irresistible power of National Socialist fighting spirit. His photograph appeared in newspapers and propaganda publications. He was presented as the ideal SS warrior, young, fearless, decisive, victorious. But here is what the propaganda did not mention, what it carefully left out of the heroic story of the capture of Belgrade. The bombing campaign that preceded Klingenberg's arrival had killed between 3,000 and 17,000 civilians in the city. The operation was codenamed Operation Punishment, and it was exactly that. A deliberate terror bombing of a civilian population designed to break resistance and demonstrate German power. The city that Klingenberg walked into so boldly had already been partly destroyed from the air. The chaos and paralysis that allowed his bluff to work was the chaos of a traumatized civilian population that had spent a week under aerial bombardment. The heroic story of 10 men taking a city was built on the foundation of thousands of dead Yugoslav civilians. And the occupation that followed the capture of Belgrade was not the beginning of a benevolent administration. Yugoslavia under German occupation became one of the most brutal occupied territories in all of Europe. The SS and Wehrmacht forces that followed Klingenberg into Belgrade were the advance guard of an occupation regime that would murder hundreds of thousands of Yugoslav civilians, Jews, Roma, and resistance fighters over the following years. Serbia alone lost approximately 1 million people to the occupation. The moment of Klingenberg's theatrical triumph was the opening act of a catastrophe for the people of Yugoslavia. Klingenberg went on from Belgrade to the Eastern Front. Operation Barbarossa began in June 1941, and he was part of it from the beginning, serving with Das Reich Division in the massive drive into the Soviet Union. The Eastern Front was nothing like the quick campaigns in the Balkans or France. It was a war of annihilation, fought on a scale and with a brutality that exceeded anything the war had yet produced. Das Reich Division, the unit Klingenberg served in, committed some of the most documented atrocities of the entire Eastern Front campaign. In October 1941, soldiers of Das Reich Division massacred the entire population of the Soviet village of Zhestyanaya Gorka. In the same period, the division was involved in mass executions of Jewish civilians in the occupied Soviet territories. These were not isolated incidents. They were part of the systematic pattern of murder that characterized SS operations in the East from the very beginning. Klingenberg was a senior officer in this division during this period. He was present in the same operational environment where these atrocities occurred. The evidence does not show him personally ordering specific massacres, but it shows him as a senior combat officer in an organization that was simultaneously fighting a war and carrying out systematic murder. The line between combat operations and atrocity was constantly blurred on the Eastern Front, and senior SS officers like Klingenberg existed within and contributed to a system where both happened simultaneously. He was wounded on the Eastern Front and spent time recovering. When he returned to active duty, he continued to rise through the SS officer ranks. His reputation as an exceptionally capable and aggressive combat commander remained intact. He was promoted to Sturmbannführer and then to Obersturmbannführer. He received additional decorations. He commanded larger and larger units. By 1944, he was given command of the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division Gotz von Berlichingen. This was a significant command, a full SS division, and it placed him among the senior tier of Waffen-SS combat commanders. The division was committed to fighting in France after the D-Day landings in June 1944, facing Allied forces driving inland from the Normandy beaches. The fighting in Normandy was brutal and attritional in a way that was completely different from the fast-moving campaigns of the early war. Allied air power dominated the battlefield in a way that made every movement in daylight dangerous. Allied artillery was overwhelming, and the Allied ground forces, initially slower than the German commanders had hoped to break out from the beaches, were steadily building up their strength and pushing the German defensive lines back. The 17th SS Division fought hard in Normandy, but the strategic situation was impossible. Germany was losing the war, and everyone who could read a map knew it. Klingenberg survived Normandy. He survived the catastrophic collapse of the German position in France after the breakout from the Falaise Pocket in August 1944. He continued commanding his division as Germany fell back toward its own borders. The last year of the war was a desperate defensive struggle against overwhelming Allied forces from the west and the Soviet Union from the east. He was killed on March 22, 1945. He was 32 years old. He died in Herxheim am Berg, in the Rhineland-Palatinate region of Germany. Killed in combat, as Allied forces drove deep into the German heartland in the final weeks of the war. Germany would surrender less than 7 weeks later. Klingenberg never saw the end. He was buried with full military honors. He was posthumously promoted to Brigadeführer, a general's rank, by the Nazi regime in the final chaotic weeks before the surrender. It was a gesture that meant nothing by the time it was made. The regime that had made him famous was collapsing. The propaganda apparatus that had turned his Belgrade adventure into a national legend was burning. The 1,000-year Reich had about 6 weeks left. Here is what we need to understand about Fritz Klingenberg. The story of Belgrade is genuinely extraordinary. 10 men, a rubber boat, a bluff that worked, an enemy capital taken without a single shot fired. As a purely military story, it is remarkable, and it will always be remarkable. The audacity required to do what Klingenberg did on April 13, 1941, was real. The courage was real. The tactical improvisation was real. But the story exists within a context that cannot be separated from it. The context of what the SS was, what it was doing in Yugoslavia and across occupied Europe, what it was doing on the Eastern Front where Klingenberg served. The propaganda that made Klingenberg famous was the propaganda of a genocidal regime. The organization he served with such distinction was an organization that murdered millions of people. The bold young officer crossing the Danube in a rubber boat was also a senior member of a criminal organization that committed atrocities on a scale that the world had never seen before. Fritz Klingenberg was brave. He was talented. He was the kind of soldier that military historians write about because his individual story is genuinely compelling. And all of that was in service of one of the most murderous regimes in human history. Those two things are both true. They exist together. And honest history requires us to hold both of them in our minds at the same time. The remarkable story and the terrible context. The individual courage and the collective crime. That is the complete picture of Fritz Klingenberg. And anything less than the complete picture is not history. It is myth.